The rain poured down in sheets as Damien Irwin stared out the window of his Range Rover, watching the village of Willowmere emerge through the mist like something from a forgotten century. He had come here to escape the suffocating demands of running a pharmaceutical empire, the endless board meetings, the merger negotiations that had consumed the last 5 years of his life. 1 month in a remote English village, that was all he needed to clear his head and decide if he truly wanted to sell his company for $3 billion. The cottage sat at the end of a narrow lane, surrounded by overgrown hedges and wild roses that climbed the stone walls in tangled profusion. It looked exactly like the photographs, charmingly rustic with its thatched roof and mullioned windows, though the reality was considerably wetter than the online listing had suggested. Damien parked and made a dash for the front door, his expensive leather shoes immediately soaking through. He knocked, and after a moment the door swung open to reveal a man in his 60s with weathered hands and kind eyes. "Mr. Irwin, I presume. Come in before you drown out there. Thank you." Damien stepped into a cozy entrance hall that smelled of baking bread and lavender. "You must be Mr. Thompson. Call me George, please. Let me show you around." The older man led him through rooms filled with mismatched furniture and watercolor paintings of the countryside. "The cottage has been in my family for generations. My daughter and I have tried to keep everything authentic while adding modern conveniences. The Wi-Fi is surprisingly good, and the heating works well enough, though you will want to keep the fireplace going on cold evenings." Damien nodded, already feeling some of the tension leaving his shoulders. This was exactly what he needed, somewhere far removed from the gleaming steel towers of London, from the constant pressure to perform, to exceed, to conquer. "My daughter Victoria handles most of the property management these days," George continued, leading him upstairs. "She teaches at the village school, but she lives in the main house just across the garden. If you need anything, she is usually around in the evenings and weekends." They reached the bedroom, a spacious room with exposed beams and a 4-poster bed draped in white linen. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking an orchard heavy with apples. Despite the rain, Damien could see the appeal of the place. "This is perfect," he said, meaning it. George smiled with evident relief. "Wonderful. I will leave you to settle in. Victoria will stop by this evening with some supplies, fresh eggs and bread, milk, that sort of thing. The nearest proper shop is in the next village, about 3 miles. After George left, Damien unpacked his single suitcase. He had deliberately brought minimal clothing, mostly jeans and sweaters, a conscious decision to leave behind the bespoke suits and Italian shoes that defined his London existence. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from his CFO, his lawyers, his investment bankers, all wanting answers about the pending sale. He silenced it and tossed it onto the bed. The rain had softened to a drizzle by evening when a knock came at the door. Damien had been attempting to light the fireplace with limited success, and he answered with soot on his hands and frustration evident on his face. The woman on the doorstep froze mid-knock, her eyes widening slightly. She held a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth, and her dark hair hung in a braid over one shoulder, dampened by the mist. She wore jeans and a green wax jacket, muddy boots on her feet, and she looked absolutely nothing like the women he usually encountered in London with their designer clothes and carefully curated appearances. "You must be Mr. Irwin," she said, her voice melodic with a soft local accent. "I am Victoria Thompson. Dad said you had arrived. Damien, please." He stepped back to let her in, suddenly conscious of his disheveled appearance. "And yes, I have arrived, though I am apparently incompetent at basic fire starting." A smile flickered across her face, transforming her features from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "It takes practice. The chimney has a trick to it. May I?" She set the basket on the kitchen table and moved past him to the fireplace. Damien caught a scent of rain and something floral, subtle and natural. She knelt down, rearranged the logs with practiced efficiency, adjusted the kindling, and within minutes had a cheerful fire crackling away. "The flue needs to be opened wider," she explained, standing and brushing off her hands. "And you want the smaller pieces at the front, larger ones at the back. It draws better that way." "Thank you. I would have eventually filled the place with smoke. Probably." Her eyes held amusement. "I brought you some basics. Fresh eggs from our chickens, bread I baked this morning, milk from the dairy farm up the road, butter, cheese, some vegetables from the garden. There is a proper grocery delivery service if you want to set up an account, but most people in the village just go to Millfield on market day." "This is incredibly generous." Damien moved to the basket, genuinely touched. In London, such neighborly gestures did not exist. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. It is just a welcome to Willowmere." She headed toward the door, clearly not intending to linger. "If you need anything, I am just across the garden in the main house, the stone one with the blue door." "Wait," Damien said, surprising himself. "Could you possibly show me how to work the stove? It looks like something from a museum." Victoria paused, studying him with an expression he could not quite read. "It is an aga. They are quite common here, though I suppose if you are from London." "I am from London," he confirmed. "And my kitchen there is almost entirely unused. I mostly order in." She laughed, a genuine sound that filled the cottage. "Right then. Let me give you a quick tutorial or you will starve within the week." Over the next 20 minutes, she explained the mysteries of the aga, a cast iron stove that apparently stayed on continuously and had different ovens for different purposes. Damien found himself less interested in the technical details and more fascinated by the way her face animated when she talked, the gestures of her hands, the patient way she explained things without condescension. "You are going to think I am completely useless," he admitted when she finished. "I run a company with 5,000 employees, but I cannot operate a stove." "What kind of company?" She leaned against the counter, apparently in no hurry to leave now. "Pharmaceuticals. We develop treatments for autoimmune diseases primarily." He deliberately kept it vague. The last thing he wanted was for word to spread that a billionaire was hiding in their village. "I am taking a sabbatical to figure out some things." That sounds stressful. Her expression held sympathy. "Willowmere is a good place to think. Nothing much happens here, which is either incredibly boring or wonderfully peaceful, depending on your perspective." "Which is it for you?" "Both," she said honestly. "I grew up here, moved to London for university, taught there for 5 years, then came back when my mother died. Dad needed help, and I discovered I had missed this place more than I realized. The pace, the people, the sense of community. But sometimes I miss the energy of the city, the anonymity, the options." "The options," she shrugged, a hint of color rising in her cheeks. "Dating options primarily. Everyone in Willowmere has known me since I was in nappies, not exactly conducive to romance." Damien smiled. "I can imagine that would be challenging. Anyway." Victoria pushed off from the counter. "I should let you settle in. School tomorrow and I have papers to mark. But if you need anything, truly, just knock on the blue door." After she left, Damien found himself standing in the now warm cottage, watching through the window as she crossed the garden with an easy, confident stride. He turned to the basket she had brought, unpacked the still warm bread, the brown eggs in their cardboard carton, the wheel of local cheese. When had anyone last done something kind for him without wanting anything in return? He could not remember. That night, he made himself scrambled eggs and toast, simple fare that tasted better than meals at Michelin-starred restaurants. He sat by the fire with a book he had been meaning to read for years, and for the first time in months, his mind stopped its constant churning through profit margins and acquisition terms. Instead, he found himself thinking about dark hair in a braid and muddy boots, and the sound of genuine laughter. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Damien woke early from habit, then realized he had nowhere he needed to be. It was a peculiar feeling. He made coffee using the ancient percolator Victoria had shown him, burned the first pot, succeeded with the second, then ventured outside to explore. The garden was larger than he had realized, a rambling space filled with late summer flowers and fruit trees. A stone path led through an archway of climbing roses to the main house, a substantial Georgian structure with the blue door Victoria had mentioned. Chickens scratched in a wire enclosure, and a large ginger cat watched him from a sunny windowsill with regal indifference. "Good morning." He turned to find Victoria coming around the side of the house in running clothes, her face flushed and hair pulled back in a ponytail. Even sweaty and breathless, she looked vibrant and alive in a way that made his pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Morning," he replied. "I was just exploring." "Hope that is all right. Of course. The garden is yours to enjoy. I usually run early before school. There is a footpath that goes along the river and up through the woods, beautiful this time of year." She grabbed a towel from the porch railing and wiped her face. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months, actually. It is the quiet. Takes some getting used to if you are from the city, but it works magic on the nervous system." She checked her watch. "I need to shower and get ready. 28 8-year-olds wait for no one. But I am making a cottage pie tonight if you would like to join Dad and me for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a proper home-cooked meal." Damien knew he should decline, keep his distance, maintain the solitude he had come here seeking. Instead, he heard himself say, "I would like that very much." Her smile was brilliant. 7 o'clock. Come hungry." He spent the day walking through the village, a collection of stone cottages clustered around a Norman church and a pub called the Green Man. The village shop sold everything from newspapers to Wellingtons, and the woman behind the counter greeted him with frank curiosity. "You must be the Londoner renting Ivy Cottage," she said. "I am Margaret Winters. My husband runs the pub. You will have to stop in for a pint and meet everyone properly." "I will do that," Damien promised, charmed despite himself. "Victoria Thompson is a lovely girl," Margaret continued, clearly fishing. "Came back from the city to care for her father. Heart of gold, that one. All the single men for miles around have tried, but she is particular. Waiting for the right one, I expect." Damien bought milk and chocolate biscuits and escaped before Margaret could probe further. He was not here for romance, he reminded himself firmly. He was here to think about his future, to decide if he wanted to spend the rest of his life building an empire, or if he wanted something else, though what that something else might be remained frustratingly unclear. But 7 o'clock found him crossing the garden with a bottle of wine he had found in the cottage and anticipation that felt dangerously like excitement. George answered the door and welcomed him into a house that was comfortably cluttered with books, newspapers, and the general accumulation of life well lived. "Damien, come in, come in. Victoria is just pulling the pie from the oven. Go through to the kitchen." The kitchen was warm and filled with delicious smells. Victoria stood at the aga wearing an apron over jeans and a soft blue sweater that matched her eyes. Her hair was down now, falling in waves past her shoulders, and Damien felt something shift in his chest. "Perfect timing," she said, sliding an enormous dish onto the counter. "This needs to rest for a few minutes anyway. Dad, can you open that wine?" They ate in the dining room at a scarred oak table that George said had been his grandmother's. The cottage pie was rich with lamb and vegetables, topped with fluffy mashed potatoes browned to perfection. They talked easily, George telling stories about the village history, Victoria describing the challenges of teaching in a school with mixed-age classrooms. "We have 28 students total," she explained. "I teach the 7 to 9-year-olds. It is chaos and magic in equal measure." "You love it," Damien observed, watching the way her face lit up when she talked about her students. "I do. They are at that perfect age where everything is fascinating, and they still think teachers know everything. Give them a few more years, and they will realize how little we actually have figured out." "I doubt you give yourself enough credit," Damien said. George excused himself after dinner to watch a football match, leaving them to handle the dishes. Victoria washed while Damien dried, a comfortable domestic rhythm that felt oddly intimate. "So what made you choose Willowmere?" Victoria asked. "Of all the villages in England, why here? Honestly, I searched for the most remote place I could find with decent internet and picked the first listing that looked acceptable." He set a plate on the rack. "I needed distance from my life, from decisions I have to make. Must be big decisions to warrant running away to the middle of nowhere." "I've been offered $3 billion for my company," he said, then immediately wondered why he had told her. He had not told anyone, not even his closest friends. "I built it from nothing, spent 15 years pouring everything into it, and now I need to decide if I am ready to walk away." Victoria turned off the water and dried her hands, her expression thoughtful. "What would you do if you sold?" "I have absolutely no idea. That is the problem. Maybe the question is not what you would do, but who you would be without it. If you are not Damien, the pharmaceutical executive, who are you?" He looked at her, struck by the perceptiveness of the question. "I do not know. I have not been anything else since I was 23 years old." "Then maybe this month is your chance to find out." She hung up the dish towel. "Come on, I want to show you something." She led him outside and across the darkening garden to an old stone barn he had not noticed before. Inside, she flipped a switch, and lights revealed a workshop filled with half-finished paintings, canvases stacked against the walls, jars of brushes, tubes of paint scattered across a work table. "This is my space," she said, "where I come when teaching gets overwhelming or the world feels too loud. I am not particularly good, but it does not matter. Creating something from nothing, capturing the way light falls on water or the exact color of the sky before a storm, it reminds me that I am more than just my job." Damien walked slowly through the space, studying the canvases. She was wrong about her skill. The paintings were beautiful, loose and expressive, full of emotion and light. "These are remarkable. You are kind to say so." She picked up a palette, ran her thumb along the dried paint. "My point is that you are allowed to be more than one thing. You can be the man who built a pharmaceutical empire and the man who wants something different. They do not cancel each other out." "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the same time I realized that running back to Willowmere was not failure. It was just choosing a different path." She set down the palette. "I should let you go. Early start tomorrow." But Damien did not want to go. He wanted to stay in this barn filled with creative chaos, talking to this woman who somehow understood things he had not been able to articulate to himself. "Thank you," he said finally. "For dinner, for this, for not treating me like I am crazy for walking away from $3 billion. You are not crazy. You are human." She walked him to the door. "And you are welcome anytime for dinner or conversation or just to sit quietly, whatever you need." The days developed a rhythm. Damien woke early and walked through the village or along the river path Victoria had mentioned. He worked in the mornings, handling essential business via email and video calls, but limited himself to 3 hours maximum. The afternoons were for reading, exploring, or sitting in the Green Man nursing a pint and talking to the locals who quickly accepted him as a temporary member of their community. And the evenings were increasingly spent with Victoria. It started casually enough. She would knock on his door to drop off extra vegetables from the garden or to ask if he wanted to join her for a walk. He found himself inventing reasons to visit the main house, asking George about the best fishing spots or helping Victoria carry in groceries from her car. They fell into the habit of cooking together several times a week, trading off between the cottage and her kitchen, testing recipes and arguing good-naturedly about the proper way to make Yorkshire pudding. "You are supposed to let the batter rest," Victoria insisted, whisking vigorously. "That is old wives' tale. The science does not support it." Damien consulted his phone where he had pulled up an article from a food science website. "Oh, because a London billionaire knows better than generations of Yorkshire women." She shot him a look. He froze. "Billionaire." She set down the whisk, her expression sheepish. "Margaret at the shop might have done some Googling after you mentioned your company. I am sorry. I know you were probably trying to avoid that. And you are not treating me any differently, which I appreciate more than you know." He moved closer. "Most people, when they find out, suddenly want things. Investment opportunities, donations, favors. You just keep arguing with me about pudding." "Because I am right about the pudding." But she smiled. "Your money does not change who you are here. You are just Damien who cannot light a fire and burns coffee and is trying to figure out what he wants from life. That is the person I see." "Is that really how you see me?" "Yes." She met his gaze steadily. "Though you are getting better at the fire lighting." 3 weeks into his month-long stay, autumn began to assert itself with golden light and crisp mornings. Damien realized with something approaching panic that his time in Willowmere was running out, and he still had not made a decision about selling the company. But more pressingly, he had not figured out what to do about Victoria. Because somewhere between the cottage pie and the painting barn, between learning to use the aga and arguing about Yorkshire pudding, he had fallen completely in love with her. It was not like anything he had experienced before. In London, he dated women who understood his world, who were equally driven and ambitious, who expected expensive restaurants and luxury holidays. Those relationships had been passionate but ultimately shallow, lacking the deep compatibility and genuine connection he shared with Victoria. She challenged him, made him laugh, listened without judgment, and saw through the armor he had built around himself to the uncertain, searching person underneath. She was brilliant and kind and real in a way that made everything else in his life feel hollow by comparison. But what could he offer her? A life in London, surrounded by the very things she had deliberately chosen to leave behind. The constant pressure and publicity that came with his position. He could not ask her to give up her students, her father, the life she loved for a future that would require her to be someone she was not. He was brooding over this problem while attempting to make bread using Victoria's recipe when a knock came at the door. He opened it to find her standing there in a dress, which was unusual enough to stop his thoughts entirely. She usually wore jeans or the practical skirts she favored for teaching. This dress was deep green, fitted at the waist, falling to just above her knees, and she wore it with boots and a leather jacket that somehow made the whole effect even more appealing. "We are going out," she announced. "There is a harvest festival in Millfield and you have been cooped up long enough. Go change into something nice." "Are you asking me on a date, Miss Thompson?" Color rose in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "What if I am?" His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Then I would say give me 5 minutes. Millfield was larger than Willowmere, a market town with a high street and several pubs. The festival filled the town square with craft stalls, food vendors, and a band playing folk music on a makeshift stage. Victoria had driven them in her battered Land Rover, and they walked through the crowds with an ease that felt both comfortable and charged with new possibility. She bought them cider from a local orchard, and they listened to the music while leaning against a stone wall that marked the edge of the churchyard. The setting sun painted everything gold and amber, and Damien thought he had never seen her look more beautiful. "Why teaching?" he asked. "You clearly love it, but what made you choose it?" "I wanted to do something that mattered," she said simply. "Not in a grand, save-the-world way, though if I help shape good humans, maybe that is saving the world in a small way. But I wanted work that felt meaningful every day, even on the hard days. Making a difference in a child's life, helping them discover they are smart or creative or capable, that matters more to me than anything I could do in a corporate office." "You make me want to be better," Damien heard himself say. "To care about things beyond profit margins and market share." She turned to him, her expression serious. "You already are better, Damien. You built a company that develops medicine to help people. That is not nothing. But is it enough?" The question escaped before he could stop it. "Is it enough for a life? Only you can answer that." She set her cup down and took his hand, the first deliberately intimate gesture between them. Her fingers were warm and strong, and his closed around them reflexively. "But I think you already know what you want. You are just afraid to reach for it." "What if what I want is impossible?" "I do not believe in impossible. Difficult, maybe. Complicated, certainly, but not impossible." They stayed until the festival ended, then drove back to Willowmere under a sky thick with stars unmarred by city light. Victoria parked in her usual spot, but neither of them moved to get out. "I have one more week here," Damien said into the darkness. "Then my sabbatical is over and I have to return to London and make final decisions." "I know." Her voice was quiet. "Victoria," he turned to her, "I need you to understand something. This past month has been the best of my life, not despite being here, but because of it. Because of you. You have made me question everything I thought I wanted, everything I thought mattered. And I cannot leave without telling you that I am in love with you." In the dim light, he saw her eyes widen. "Damien, you do not have to say anything. I know the timing is terrible, and I know I am asking for something complicated, but I needed you to know, before I leave, what you have come to mean to me." She reached up and cupped his face with both hands, her touch gentle and sure. "You foolish, wonderful man. I have been in love with you for 2 weeks now. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that you would leave and go back to your real life and I would get over it. But then you would burn something in the kitchen or ask me to explain village politics with such genuine interest, and I would fall a little more. Then stay with me," he said urgently. "Come back to London when I leave. We can make this work. I will make sure of it." She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "That is not the answer. You cannot transplant one life into another and expect it to thrive. We both know I would wither in London, and asking you to give up everything you have built is not fair either. So what do we do?" The frustration in his voice was raw. "I do not know yet, but we have one more week. Let us not waste it on panic and planning. Let us just be together and trust that the answer will come." He kissed her then, finally, a kiss they had been building toward for weeks. She tasted of cider and possibility, and when she kissed him back with equal fervor, Damien felt something settle into place deep in his chest, a sense of rightness he had been chasing his entire adult life. They spent the remaining week in a bubble of bittersweet intensity. Damien pushed back his return date by 2 days, then 3, earning increasingly frantic calls from his CFO. But he ignored them all in favor of helping Victoria prepare her classroom for a new term, walking for hours through the countryside while holding her hand, making love by firelight in his cottage while rain drummed on the thatch overhead. George, to his credit, said nothing about the fact that his daughter was spending most nights across the garden. He simply welcomed Damien warmly and occasionally left meaningful silences in the conversation that neither of them filled. On what was supposed to be Damien's last day, they packed a picnic and hiked to a hilltop overlooking the village. The view stretched for miles, a patchwork of fields and hedgerows, church spires rising from clusters of stone buildings. Willowmere sat in a valley, peaceful and unchanged by the modern world rushing past. "I cannot imagine leaving this," Damien said. "Leaving you? Then do not." Victoria said it simply, as if the solution was obvious. "I have responsibilities, commitments, which you can handle from anywhere. You have proven that over the past month." She turned to face him fully. "I am not asking you to give up your company or your ambitions, but maybe you could base yourself here instead of London. Work remotely, go to the city when absolutely necessary, but build your life here. Build it with me." "You would want that, having me underfoot cluttering up your village." "I would want nothing more." Her voice trembled slightly. "I know it is fast and I know it is unconventional, but I have never been more certain of anything. You belong here, Damien. Not because of me, though I hope I am part of it, but because you have been more yourself in this past month than you probably have been in years. I have watched you transform from this tense, exhausted man into someone who laughs easily and talks to strangers and genuinely enjoys each day. That is who you are when you let yourself be. Do not go back to London and let that person disappear." Damien looked out over the valley, then back at Victoria's face, open and vulnerable and filled with love. She was offering him everything he had been too afraid to name. Not just her love, but a different life, a better life, one where he could be both the man he had worked so hard to become and the man he wanted to be. "My board will think I have lost my mind," he said slowly. "Setting up permanent residence in a village of 300 people while running a pharmaceutical empire. Probably," she smiled. "Does that matter?" "Not even slightly." He pulled her close, felt her arms wrap around him. "I will need to go back to London to sort things out properly. Restructure how I operate, hire people to handle what I have been doing myself, set up systems for remote management. That will take time." "How much time?" 3 months, maybe 4. "I will have to be there more at first, coming back and forth. But by spring, I could be based here permanently." He pulled back to look at her. "If you are willing to wait, to deal with me being gone more than here for a while. I have waited this long for the right person. A few more months is nothing." She kissed him softly. "But Damien, you need to be sure. I do not want you making this choice because of me and resenting it later. This has to be what you want for yourself." "It is," he said with absolute certainty. "I know it seems insane, but I have never been more sure of anything. I will sell part of the company to raise capital and maintain control of the rest. Restructure the leadership so I can step back from day-to-day operations. Focus on the research and development that I actually care about. I will build something sustainable instead of constantly chasing growth. And I will do it from here, from Willowmere with you." Tears sparkled in her eyes. "That sounds perfect. There is one condition, though." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, felt her sharp intake of breath. "I bought this 3 days ago in Millfield. I know it is absurdly fast, and we can have a long engagement if you want, but Victoria Thompson, I am hopelessly in love with you. I want to wake up in that cottage with you beside me and grow old in this village and maybe fill that orchard with children someday. So will you marry me?" She was crying openly now, nodding before he even finished speaking. Yes, absolutely yes. The ring was a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, chosen to match her eyes. It fit perfectly, and Damien sent a silent thank you to the jeweler in Millfield who had assured him of the size. They stayed on the hilltop until the sun began to set, making plans and revising them, discussing everything from where they would live to how many children they wanted to whether 3 cats was too many for one household. "We will need a bigger house eventually," Victoria said practically. "The cottage is perfect for now, but if we are having children, we will want more space." "We could buy the old rectory," Damien suggested. "I saw it is for sale. Huge place with amazing grounds." "That is a manor house, Damien, not a family home." "Exactly. Big enough for a family, space for your painting studio, room for me to set up a proper home office, and still have areas for visiting family and entertaining." He grinned at her expression. "I am a billionaire, remember? I might as well use some of the money for something meaningful." "This is going to take some getting used to," she admitted. "Dating someone who can casually suggest buying a manor house. You will adjust. And I will adjust to village life where everyone knows everyone's business, and Margaret at the shop probably has already heard we got engaged, despite the fact that we are currently alone on a hilltop." Victoria laughed. "She absolutely has. I guarantee you George has already texted everyone we know. My phone is probably exploding right now." They walked back to the village as twilight deepened, hand in hand, making their way down the familiar path that Damien now knew by heart. Lights glowed in cottage windows, and smoke rose from chimneys. From the Green Man came the sounds of laughter and conversation. It looked like a picture postcard, impossibly charming, and Damien felt a surge of profound gratitude that he had found this place, this life, this woman. The next morning, he did leave for London, but with a completely different mindset than when he had arrived. The city felt overwhelming after the peace of Willowmere, the noise and crowds jarring. But he threw himself into the work of restructuring his company with renewed purpose. He met with his board and weathered their concerns about his plans to work remotely. He promoted talented executives into positions that would allow proper delegation. He sold 40% of the company to a consortium of investors for $1.2 billion, retaining majority control but gaining the capital and infrastructure to shift his role from operational manager to strategic director. He hired a chief operating officer who could handle the London office and daily management. He set up video conferencing systems and project management software that would allow him to stay connected without being physically present. He reworked his schedule so that he would only need to be in London 1 week per month, at most. It took 3.5 months of brutal work, 18-hour days, and more video calls than he cared to count. But by mid-January, the restructuring was complete. Damien packed up his London penthouse, arranged to keep it for the nights he needed to be in the city, and drove back to Willowmere with his belongings in a moving van. Victoria met him in the garden, her face glowing despite the cold winter air. "Welcome home, home." The words settled into his bones like truth. They had decided to stay in the cottage while the rectory underwent renovations, and Damien was surprised to find he did not mind the close quarters. If anything, the small space felt cozy and intimate, especially with Victoria's touches added throughout, her paintings on the walls, her books on the shelves, her presence in every room. The village welcomed him back with genuine warmth. Margaret proclaimed that she had known all along they were meant to be together. George pulled him aside for a conversation about intentions and treating his daughter right, which Damien endured with good grace and absolute sincerity. Even the vicar stopped by to discuss wedding plans, having heard they were hoping for a spring ceremony. Work settled into a sustainable rhythm. Damien discovered he could accomplish more in focused 4-hour blocks than he had in full days at the London office, freed from constant interruptions and unnecessary meetings. He took calls from the cottage, reviewed reports while drinking tea in the Green Man, strategized company direction during walks through the countryside with Victoria. His team adjusted to the new system more easily than anticipated. The chief operating officer thrived in her expanded role, and the executive team appreciated having clearer boundaries and defined responsibilities. The company continued to grow, but in a more measured, sustainable way that allowed Damien to focus on what he actually cared about, funding innovative research and developing treatments that made a real difference. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came their wedding. They married in the Norman church with the entire village in attendance. Victoria wore a simple ivory dress and carried wildflowers from the hedgerows. Damien wore a suit but left the tie behind, a small rebellion that made Victoria smile when she walked down the aisle. George gave her away with tears in his eyes, and when Damien said his vows, promising to love and honor her for all his days, he meant every word with a conviction that shook him. This was what he had been missing, what all the success and money and achievement could never provide. A true partner, a real home, a life built on love and purpose. The reception was held in the Green Man's garden, transformed with fairy lights and long tables laden with food prepared by half the village. They danced to folk music under the stars, surrounded by people who had become friends and family. Margaret caught the bouquet and immediately tried to set her sights on Damien's newly single CFO, who had made the trip from London and looked both charmed and overwhelmed by village life. "She is terrifying," he whispered to Damien. "She knows things. How does she know things?" "Village magic," Damien replied solemnly. "Best not to question it." They spent their honeymoon in Scotland, hiking through the highlands and staying in remote cottages that made Willowmere seem positively cosmopolitan. But Damien found himself eager to return home, to the cottage and the village and the life they were building together. By summer, the rectory was finished, and they moved into the sprawling house with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It took time to make the space feel like theirs, but gradually it filled with life. Victoria's painting studio occupied the entire south wing, flooded with natural light. Damien's office looked out over the gardens, and he found he did his best thinking while watching birds visit the feeders Victoria had hung. They adopted 3 cats from a local shelter, and the animals took over the house with regal entitlement. George moved into the cottage, declaring that the main house was too big for an old man alone anyway, though everyone knew he simply wanted to give them privacy and space to grow their marriage. That autumn, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. They broke the news to George over Sunday dinner, and he cried openly while pulling them both into a fierce hug. "Your mother would be so happy," he told Victoria. "She always wanted grandchildren to spoil." The pregnancy was uncomplicated but exhausting, and Damien learned patience he had never known he possessed. He rubbed her feet when they swelled, made endless cups of tea, and drove to Millfield at midnight for the specific brand of ice cream she craved. He attended every appointment, read every book about childbirth and infant care, and tried not to let his terror show when the due date approached. Their daughter was born on a May morning, arriving with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair. They named her Emma Rose, and when Damien held her for the first time, He understood with stunning clarity that every decision he had made, every path he had chosen, had led to this moment. "She is perfect," Victoria whispered from the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. "She is," Damien agreed, unable to look away from the tiny face, the miniature fingers wrapped around his thumb. "She is absolutely perfect." Parenthood was harder than he had anticipated and more rewarding than he had dreamed possible. Emma was a good baby, generally happy and curious, and she quickly became the center of their universe. Damien learned to change nappies and mix bottles, to function on minimal sleep, to soothe a crying infant at 3 in the morning while Victoria caught a few precious hours of rest. The village embraced Emma as their collective grandchild. Margaret knitted enough blankets and booties to outfit a dozen babies. The vicar blessed her in a ceremony that felt more like a village celebration. George was a devoted grandfather, always available for babysitting, and never tiring of walking his granddaughter through the gardens while pointing out flowers and birds. Work continued, but Damien maintained strict boundaries. He would not miss Emma's childhood for conference calls and board meetings. His team adapted, and he found that modeling work-life balance actually improved company culture across the organization. When Emma was 18 months old, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. Twins this time, boys, and their arrival turned the house into joyful chaos. James and Oliver were fraternal twins with completely different personalities from birth. James was contemplative and gentle, while Oliver was all energy and mischief. "Our lives are insane," Victoria said one evening when they finally had all 3 children asleep. They sat in the conservatory they had added to the rectory, overlooking gardens now filled with play equipment and scattered toys. "Wonderfully insane," Damien agreed, pulling her close. "I would not change a thing. Not even the part where Oliver Finger painted the dining room wall yesterday, not even that, though I reserve the right to be less philosophical when they are teenagers." She laughed and settled against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the evening sounds of the countryside. Damien thought about the man he had been when he first arrived in Willowmere, stressed and searching, unsure what he wanted beyond escape from a life that no longer fit. He had come for a month and stayed for a lifetime, and it was the best decision he had ever made. Years passed in a blur of school plays and birthday parties, of teaching children to ride bikes and helping with homework, of family holidays and quiet evenings by the fire. Emma started at the village school where Victoria taught, which caused complications and connections in equal measure. The twins followed a few years later, bringing chaos to their mother's classroom and delight to her teaching. Damien's company continued to thrive, developing groundbreaking treatments that saved lives and improved outcomes for patients worldwide. But he measured success differently now, not in profits or market share, but in time spent with his family, in the laughter of his children, in the quiet moments with Victoria when they would exchange glances across the dinner table and communicate everything without words. George remained a vital presence in their lives until he passed peacefully in his sleep at 82, surrounded by family and with a satisfied smile on his face. They buried him in the churchyard, and the entire village turned out to honor a man who had been the heart of their community. Emma, at 10 years old, read a poem she had written about her grandfather, and there was not a dry eye in attendance. Victoria grieved deeply, but with the strength that Damien had always admired. "He had a good life," she said. "He got to see me happy, got to know his grandchildren, got to stay in the place he loved until the end. That is more than most people get." The children grew and changed, developing into remarkable individuals. Emma inherited her mother's artistic talent and her father's head for science, already talking about studying biochemistry at university. James was the quiet scholar, always with a book in hand, dreaming of becoming a teacher like his mother. Oliver was pure energy channeled into athletics, captaining the village football team and talking about professional sports. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Damien and Victoria returned to the hilltop where he had proposed. The view was unchanged, Willowmere still peaceful in its valley, though the rectory was now visible with its expanded wings and well-tended grounds. "You ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Giving up the London life, the constant drive to build bigger and achieve more?" "Never," Damien said immediately. "That man was successful but empty. This life with you, with our children, with this community, this is success that actually matters. I am happier now than I ever imagined possible. Even when the twins crashed your video conference last month dressed as pirates, especially then." He pulled her close, kissed her the way he had on this hilltop 2 decades ago. "You were right, that first week when you told me I needed to figure out who I was beyond my company. You helped me discover that I am a husband, a father, a member of a community. I am someone who belongs somewhere, who matters to people, who has built something lasting that is not measured in quarterly earnings." "You built a family," Victoria said softly. "You built a life. That is the greatest achievement of all." They stood together as the sun set over Willowmere, painting the valley in gold and amber light. Damien thought about the frightened, searching man who had rented a cottage for 1 month, never imagining he would find everything he had been missing. Victoria had seen past his wealth and status to the person underneath, had challenged him to be better, to want more than just professional success. She had made him stay not through manipulation or persuasion, but simply by being herself, by showing him what life could be when built on love and purpose rather than achievement and acquisition. The cottage that was meant for 1 month had become a doorway to a lifetime, and Damien was grateful every day that he had walked through it. As they made their way back down the hillside in the gathering darkness, hand in hand as they had been for 20 years, Damien knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. The billionaire who had come to escape had found instead the greatest treasure of all: a home, a family, and a love that had transformed everything. And in the cottage at the end of the lane, lights glowed warmly, waiting to welcome them back.